A very warm welcome, my fellow citizens, to this third update from Transparency International Zambia under the Kuteteza Masankho project, which is our elections project. As part of our long-term election observation efforts ahead of the 13th August 2026 general elections, TIZ continues to monitor the electoral environment nationwide and to engage with stakeholders on issues affecting electoral integrity. Through these regular updates, we seek to keep citizens informed while also contributing towards peaceful, transparent, accountable, and credible elections. For today's update, we will focus on three issues that have emerged from our election observation activities, these being the Electoral Commission of Zambia's voter education campaign, the presidential candidates' campaign schedule, and results from our ongoing monitoring of electoral incidents across the country. I will begin with the first issue, which is the ECZ's voter education campaign. TIZ commends the Electoral Commission of Zambia for intensifying its nationwide voter education campaign ahead of the August elections. We have noted that the ECZ has recruited voter educators across the country and is running a very well-coordinated media campaign under the hashtag #CountMeIn through adverts and other programs on radio and television. Now, we commend this action because an informed electorate is a fundamental ingredient for strengthening democracy and also ensuring that elections are conducted in a peaceful, transparent, and credible manner. As polling day draws closer, TIZ encourages every eligible voter to participate in the electoral process by taking time to understand the voting procedure, to verify their polling stations, and also rejecting all forms of vote buying and other forms of electoral corruption, as well as exercising their constitutional right to vote peacefully. Every vote matters, and every citizen has a responsibility to contribute towards building a democratic Zambia through informed and active participation. Elections present an opportunity for citizens to choose leaders based on policies, competence, integrity, and the public interest, rather than fear, misinformation, or any form of financial inducement. I will now move to the second issue, which is the presidential candidates' campaign schedule. TIZ has noted that the recent clarification that was provided by the ECZ that President Hakainde Hichilema, in his capacity as head of state, will not be required to follow the presidential campaign timetable because his official engagements are governed by existing laws governing the office of the president. Now, while the president continues to exercise his executive powers, which are vested in him by virtue of Article 91 of the Constitution of Zambia, even during elections, it is TIZ's view that the use of public resources during this period should be strictly for carrying out such state duties as opposed to partisan campaign rallies or voter mobilization of any sort. While TIZ appreciates the constitutional responsibilities attached to the office of the president, this development raises some very important governance considerations. One of the fundamental principles that underpin democratic elections is the existence of a level playing field where all candidates are afforded equal opportunity to campaign. Arrangements that distinguish one candidate from others, even though legally justifiable, should be implemented with the highest levels of transparency in order to avoid creating perceptions of unequal treatment or unfair electoral advantage. The distinction between official government functions and campaign activities must therefore remain very, very clear throughout the election period. Citizens must have confidence that public resources, government programs, official travel, and state institutions are not being used or perceived to be used to support any one candidate's election campaign. TIZ therefore encourages the ECZ and all relevant public institutions to continue communicating very clearly with the public about how these arrangements will be managed in order to safeguard public confidence in the integrity and fairness of the electoral process in its entirety. I will now move to the last issue, which is results from TIZ's ongoing monitoring of electoral incidents. Now, during the 1-month period between May and June 2026, TIZ monitored a total of 218 electoral events nationwide. Of these electoral events, 159 were peaceful, while the remaining events included 12 incidents of political intimidation, 11 incidents of political violence, 11 of tense political situations that could have resulted in political violence, and 10 incidents of restrictions on political activities. Now, while it is very encouraging that nearly 73% of monitored electoral events were peaceful, the number of negative incidents demonstrates that significant efforts are still required in order to safeguard the integrity of the electoral process at all levels. Notable examples of these incidents of political violence included the destruction of campaign billboards belonging to independent parliamentary and mayoral candidates in Solwezi district, the vandalism of 2 campaign vehicles belonging to independent candidates in the same district, the destruction of UPND campaign posters in both Kalumbila and Luansha, and the disruption of a UPND campaign activity in Kitwe. Furthermore, incidents of political intimidation and restrictions included the threatening of a UPND ward councillor, a ward coordinator rather, in Kawe, the detention of an aspiring candidate in Isoka constituency, and the issuing of derogatory and demeaning remarks by suspected UPND members at an independent candidate in Mandi constituency. Now, these incidents all point to an emerging pattern, which is quite worrying as well, of political intolerance that could undermine peaceful elections if left unchecked. TIZ is particularly concerned that while such incidents continue to occur, there has been very little evidence of political parties taking visible disciplinary action against members alleged to have engaged in violence, intimidation, hate speech, or destruction of campaign materials belonging to their opponents. Public condemnation of violence is important, but it must be accompanied by decisive internal accountability measures where credible evidence does exist. Political parties have a responsibility to promote peaceful campaigns, not only through public statements, but also through the conduct of their members. TIZ therefore calls on all political parties to demonstrate zero tolerance towards political violence, hate speech, and intimidation by holding their members accountable where misconduct has been established. We further urge the Zambia Police Service and the ECZ to continue investigating all reported electoral offences professionally, impartially, and expeditiously. Visible enforcement of the law remains one of the strongest deterrents against electoral violence and lawlessness. As I conclude, as we approach the August 2026 general elections as a country, TIZ calls upon all political parties, candidates, supporters, public institutions, and indeed citizens to fulfill their respective roles in safeguarding Zambia's fragile democracy. Political competition must remain peaceful, public institutions must continue to discharge their mandates impartially, and all stakeholders must reject violence, intimidation, hate speech, electoral corruption, and all conduct that undermines the integrity of the electoral process. TIZ will continue monitoring electoral developments across the country and providing regular updates on findings from its election observation activities, as well as engaging relevant stakeholders to promote peace, transparency, credibility, and inclusivity ahead of the 2026 general elections. I thank you.